Hello everyone, how are you feeling today? It's Aeros71 here, and today I'm coming at you with one of the most requested videos of this channel, and that is an update to my Vendread deck profile. Now, there are a few reasons why I didn't really update the deck for a while, essentially, even when people ask. Well, one, I wanted to see what's going to happen in the ban list, and B, because of the ideas of what got hit on the ban list that indirectly hit the deck, essentially that summon sorcerers got banned, so I didn't really know for a while what to do with the deck. Now, this deck is still essentially experimental, in a way, and there are still some cards I'm not 100% sure, but I feel like I added like an engine or two that essentially kind of helped for the deck for a while, but there's still, because of that, there's no hand traps and only like 40 cards essentially focusing on like exploiting strategies essentially, and like when we're going to have a little bit more of a defined list, essentially we'll see a little bit more into the ban list what I can do with this deck. I might go to update it again essentially to see what we can do, and then if you guys have any comments, as usual, leave them in the comments down. Anything to say, leave it in the comments down below. Essentially let me know if like an engine is bad in your opinion or how I can change it to the better, so we can talk about that as well. But without further ado, let's jump right into the deck profile. So starting things off with the ritual monsters, the usual engine I like to run. One Executor, because it's your big boss monsters that make everybody untargetable. And then if you also use Core, he's himself untargetable as well, which is really cool. Your Battle Lord, which essentially Shockmaster during your opponent's turn, essentially, so you can essentially stop them from hand traps or whatever. And then also when it's sent to the graveyard, it's as to ritual monster, and then you also send Vendread a card to the graveyard, Vendread monster, which is really cool. And then you also have the searchable one out of the three, which is Slayer, which add to you the same idea of this guy, but add a ritual spell. Now, I do only run two Revendread Slayer, because Revendread Slayer is searchable by Preparation of Rites, and Preparation of Rites can also recycle a ritual monster from the grave. Essentially, a ritual spell only from the deck, but ritual monster can also get you one from the grave, and because of that I felt like 3 copies of this is just an overkill. So that's it for the Vendread ritual monsters. For the Vendread effect monsters, we run 1 copy of Hound Horde, 1 copy of Strategies, 1 copy of Core, and 1 copy of Anima, essentially. No Revenant. Revenant is essentially, in my opinion, I'm going to say it out loud, garbage. It's absolute garbage. It doesn't really do anything. It's, yeah, sure, it's a level 40. Yeah, sure, it's an 18-beat stick, I believe. But it just doesn't do anything. Yeah, sure, its effect is cool, but it's not really get you anywhere, essentially. It doesn't give you anything. Anima give you back a card from the banished pile, and also give you a okay effect. Core essentially is probably the best Vendread monster essentially by its effect, and also its summoning condition essentially from the graveyard. Stride is just sent to the graveyard, special summon it immediately by revealing a Vendread card, and Hound Horde just discarding a card and a Vendread card, and then special summon itself, and if you used on the field, essentially giving you the ability to banish a spell trap as a quick effect. So that's actually kind of cool. And that does it for that. Now for the generic zombie support before we'll move on to the engine itself. So first off, free Solitaire, 2 Unizombie. Again, I feel like in this deck specifically it's a little bit clugs to play 3, but if you want to play 3, you're more than welcome to go over 40 or just change something. 3 Mizuki, 1 Gozuki, and then still the 1 Shinobi Necro. In a different build I might actually going to run something else, and maybe even just run a different engine altogether, but essentially, like, Shinobi Necro in my opinion is a standard card in here because it just works so well. Essentially it's a level 2 tuner, and B, it's really good with the ritual spells, and you can banish it so easily and get it back and then summon a zombie, so it's, in my opinion, became just a standard card out of the zombie engine. And now we'll move on to the mini additional zombies that essentially really help the deck, and the cards that I'm talking about is the Vampires. I'm running 4 Vampires, which is Familiar, Retainer, Fioline, and Scarlet Scourge. All of these have their own usage. Familiar and Retainer are probably the most useful one. Fioline is essentially your hand trap, and Scarlet Scourge is essentially 2 monsters as the price of 1, and it's also really useful because it's a level 6. So these 4, in my opinion, like, it sounds like a weird engine to add as like changing the deck and like cutting down the the Banshee and the what called Glow Up Bloom and Doom King, I believe, and all that stuff. I decided to cut those down because essentially, like, getting your field spell Zombie Warp from Terraforming is a lot better than get it from Banshee. But even then, I don't like to run it. I don't like to depend on it. Essentially, I want to depend more on the ritual and essentially have more something consistent. And it's just really, really helpful. Like, trust me. Like, I'm going to explain you guys why it's so helpful. You run more vampire cards. I'm just not sure about the vampire engine yet. But these are the 4 monsters that you run. And that's it for the monster lineup. Now we'll move on to the spells. 3 of the Revendread Origin, it's just a must. And then 1 of the Evolution. Evolution, like I said, is just in multiples, it's just a dead card. So in my opinion, 1 is just okay. And searchable for them, free prep, and 1 normal prep. I might going to cut this down in the future, but sometimes it's actually quite helpful. You can just Foolish Burial with like a Beatrice your ritual spell that you want to. If you don't have you didn't see the prep or the ritual monster or the ritual spell, you can just Foolish Burial and then essentially get a ritual monster and get the ritual spell from the graveyard. So it still has some applications, but it's not the best in the world. And then again, 2 copies of Vendread Charge. Vendread Charge is essentially a must. It's just really good in every Vendread deck. People used to shit on this card, but I always said this card is amazing. And people actually think like this card is really good right now. And then the other activator I have in the deck sounds weird, but 2 copies of Vampire's Desire. This card is so good. Like, it's absolutely amazing in this deck because A, it's essentially fuel up your Vampire engine. It's also another target for your Familiar and or Retainer if you see multiples, and B, it's essentially sending your Scarlet Scourge to the graveyard to essentially make another monster that you want on the field, like another monster you control a level 6, and then if you have, like, for example, a Revendread Slayer or a Stardust Charge Warrior or whatever, you can essentially make a Beatrice super easily. It's also to work real well with your Synchro, Xyz plays, and just help you with your Rituals plays. So if we like 2 copies of Vampire Desire is absolutely amazing. I am considering running up a 3rd, but then again, it's also hard once per turn, so I feel like a 3rd is just an overkill. And then for the one-offs, spells, 1 Foolish Burial, 1 1-for-1, 1 Burial from different dimension. We're not going to a crazy combo anymore, so I feel like just 1 is just enough. I might even cut it down completely, but I think like 1 is just fine. And then the 1 copy of Monster Reborn because it's freaking Monster Reborn. It's just good. And then the 1 trap, Vampire Domination. If you run a Vampire Engine, you really want to run this card. This is the card that I'm considering bumping up to 2, or 1 of the monsters, and then just making your Vampire Engine as an 8 to 10 cards engine, but we'll see. But Domination is really good, even with your Link monster, essentially, you get additional negation, which is actually kind of nice. And that does it for the main deck. And now we'll move on to the extra. So start things off with the Link monster. We start with 2 Vampire Sucker. Back in the day, I only would say that you need to run 1, but A, it's good with your Vampire cards, and B, it's a lot more important to have the arrows. Essentially, the games went into more of, like, with this deck, into more a grind game, and essentially, like, you are not more of a Link spammy deck anymore. You more of, like, you know, have this, then maybe like 2 synchros with a negate additionally to those negates connected, which is still pretty good. But essentially, like, you want to run 2 Vampire Suckers just in case. I might going to cut it down in the future to 1 as usual, but like I said, it's just a playtest of the build, so I'm not really 100% sure about it yet. Then 1 Unicorn, 1 Phoenix, 1 Cerberus, 1 Proxy Dragon, essentially probably the most generic Link 2 with the 2 arrows, which is sometimes combos up, so I decided to run this one as the 6th Link. The only Xyz I run in the deck is essentially a Beatrice, but I didn't get a Beatrice yet, and I'm pretty sure the price went up by crazy, so I'm not 100% sure if I even order it, but Beatrice is the only Xyz monster that essentially needs. For the Synchros, however, you run 1 Herald of Arclight, works really well, you can make level 4s quite easily. 1 Stardust Charge Warrior, 1 Coral Dragon for draws, 1 Black Dragon for pops, 1 Omega, and 1 Crystal Wing, which could be Savage if you wish, but these 2 are just essentially you have a negate and essentially cards that recycle your stuff and banish a card from your opponent's hand. One Trishula, because it's super easy to make in this deck. You can also just make that after, like, you make, like, for example, let's say, like, a Coral Dragon, and then you use the Coral Dragon as a tuner, then you have a level 2 and a level 1, essentially make this. Even by not banishing a card from your opponent's graveyard or even field, you still, like, rip a card out of their hand, which is really good. And then 1 copy of Sun Saga, just because I need sometimes the level 10 to make some plays, essentially to get some monsters off the board, and I don't want to make a Link monster, I just want to make a Synchro monster. And it's also giving you protection. You don't really use it for its effect anymore of like shuffling cards back, because you don't have any Synchro Zombie, as you can see from the extra deck. But even the protection with Shiranui Solitaire for like one-off protection like from the grave is essentially kind of making all of your the appropriate monsters essentially more stickier to the board and a lot more annoying to get rid of. And it's also just a beat stick by himself. So yeah, that pretty much does it for that. And that does it for the deck profile itself. So hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, subscribe as usual. Like I said, this is more of an experimental build. I hope you kind of like find it still useful and still helpful. I feel like the direction of the deck kind of changed from like being a Link spam, because Goblin Zombie went up from the deck and it essentially was the corner piece to make that thing possible with Summon Sorceress. But for the time being, I'm not 100% sure if I can ever make that into a thing anymore. But if I can, I will look into it and we'll try to do like essentially maybe you know, a Goblin Zombie spam again. But for the time being, this is, I think, a proper, essentially, still good deck to work with. Like I said, leave your comments in the section down below to let me know what card you will improve, what card you will change, and I will see you guys in the next video. Remember, creativity is the key in this game. Have a good day, guys. Stay safe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.